creating psychological safety in the workplace. So welcome. So let's jump in and see what this psychological safety in the workplace is all about. So before we review our objectives for today, I want to share with you where we got our source information for this course. And most of it originates from Miss Amy C. Edmondson. She is the author of The Fearless Organization, which was written in 2019. She's also an American Scholar of Leadership, Teaming, and Organizational Learning. Currently, she is a professor of leadership at Harvard Business School, and she is the author of 7 studies, sorry about that, 7 studies and books and 75 articles and studies. So she is very learned on this subject. And if you get the opportunity to take a look at this textbook, it is excellent. I've really actually enjoyed reading this book. It's a very easy to follow along. So check it out if you get the chance. A really great read. So moving on now to our objectives. Our first objective today is that we are going to examine what psychological safety is and is not. This is often the best way to define something. Our second objective is to discuss the importance of maintaining psychological safety, because it is something which has to be maintained. And our third objective is going to be learning how psychological safety is an important feature of all workplace cultures. So let's go ahead and jump into objective 1 and talk about what psychological safety is and isn't. So when researching this topic, I came across over and over again, many journalists and researchers, they talked about that there are like a lot of misconceptions about what psychological safety is, uncertainties, and just, plain old like made up even definitions, right? So again, there are many definitions that touch on the same thing, but this one that Edmondson offers us is the one that sums it up best. So she says to us, definition of psychological safety, it describes the belief that the work environment is safe for interpersonal risks, speaking up about a question, concern, idea, or mistake. Okay, so keep that in mind as we move through the course. So that's the best definition, again, from what I would say is an expert on the subject matter. So what is psychological safety? Well, it is creating a workplace where people know it is safe to fail, creating an environment where interpersonal fear is minimized so that the team and the organizational performance can be maximized. It is also an environment where people feel comfortable sharing concerns and mistakes without any fear of retribution or embarrassment. Additionally, psychological safety is an environment where people can speak up without feeling like they're going to be humiliated, ignored, or blamed. Psychological safety also fosters an environment that is supported by relationships with coworkers where people tend to be trusted and respected. There are also other parameters, of course, that are involved in what outlines psychological safety. But these that we're discussing, and have been on these last 2 slides here, these are the most notable for our purposes. So let us now turn to what is not psychological safety so that we can do some comparing and contrasting. So many of the ideas that I am listing for you here are often what get misconstrued with this concept. And so keep in mind, again, we're looking at what it isn't and what it is so that we can have an understanding more so of what it actually means to have psychological safety. So now taking a look at what it is not. It is not immunity from consequences. It is also not about always being nice. It is not an anything goes environment where no one has standards. And to say a little bit more about that, this attaches to that safe to fail part that I mentioned on the last slide. It's not that you're saying that people don't need to try or that they won't try. It's that you're giving them grace. You're allowing them to be humans who do, in fact, make mistakes. And that's how you create a safe workplace where you allow people to have the opportunity to not be afraid to make mistakes. Additionally, a psychologically safe environment is not a place of high regard. It's not someplace that's like uppity or snobby. Again, it doesn't guarantee job safety. It doesn't mean, well, we're just going to give everybody their job all the time and everything's okay all the time. It is not correlated with introversion or extroversion. Reason being is because psychological safety refers to a work climate that affects people with different personality traits. Additionally, it is not interchangeable with trust, even though they do have much in common with each other. And to say a little bit more about that, to make that a little more clear, the reason that trust is not interchangeable is because trust is defined as an interaction between two individuals. It's a pact that you make with someone. Two parties, they exist, that pact, it exists in the mind of two parties, where psychological safety is something that permeates an organization. It isn't something that's just between two individuals and two people. Psychological safety permeates the environment. So that's the difference between them. They're similar, again, but not exactly the same. All right, so again, these are all the no's. All right, so if we move on to discuss the importance of psychological safety, and how we maintain that. All right. So one thing that happens is when we don't have psychological safety is oftentimes people hold back, even when they believe that what they have to say is important for their organization, their team, or themselves. And in reality, nobody gains from this. But there are several reasons that people hold back. And two of the most noted reasons are as follows: the fear of being labeled or viewed negatively. The second one that's most noted is damaging work relationships. So these are the two most noted reasons that people just kind of keep their mouth shut. All right. Other reasons are not wanting to embarrass or upset someone. People often have a fear of retaliation. They have a fear of insulting someone further up the chain because they don't want to imply that a current system or a process is problematic. And I'm sure as you guys are listening to these things, you're thinking, I've been in that situation before. Yeah. All right. So these fears are organizational and personal, and good leaders, they help build an environment that enables candor. Right. So it is up to the leaders to help build this candor and this fearless organization. Let's talk about why it is important. Because one thing that can happen in an unsafe environment is this perpetuation of fear. Once it starts, it continues. And then that fear often leads people to, as we saw in the last slide, keeping quiet for many reasons. So, why and how can we make people feel safe? So, psychological safety is shaped by the leaders of an organization. They must help create and maintain, because it is, again, as I said previously, something that must be maintained. They must help create and maintain this feature of the workplace. Psychological safety can make or break the employee's ability to contribute, to grow, to learn, and to collaborate. Again, I'm sure many of you have witnessed this take place. Not to get too off topic, but one of the research studies that I've read really honed in on how this happens to new hires, and that people come in and they're super, super excited and enthusiastic, and psychological safety dwindles for new hires. And so it's really important that you maintain and keep your new hires in the game. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit more later. But it's also important that you build this environment, because what does it do? It spurs learning, it encourages speaking up, and it really does unleash talent. If people feel like they can just throw out ideas without somebody saying they're wrong, they're going to just do that, and they're going to keep doing that. So that's how we create this safe space and help people grow. So a few words on speaking up. In addition to maintaining that psychologically safe environment, as we mentioned on the previous slide, there is this ability to create an environment where people feel comfortable to speak. And when candor is part of the workplace culture, people don't feel silenced. Again, if they know that they can just say, I've got this idea, I've got that idea, then they're going to keep doing that. All right. Research shows that teams do actually improve because their climate of openness is made easier for them to report and discuss errors. We need to make sure that we are increasing learning behaviors. Teams are more likely to share approaches, suggestions, and better brainstorming ideas if they have, again, this candor and this climate of openness. Unfortunately, because the fear of speaking up does exist, it can sometimes go as something that is unseen by managers. And so, because it's unseen, managers miss this sometimes. And so, that's not uncommon. But it's not just about the managers. So I know I'm saying it's up to the managers to keep up this openness and this culture. Yes, it is, but it is up to everyone to be responsible for their climate and their workplace culture. We all get a flag to wave. We all support each other in creating this safe space. So everybody has to support the manager. If the manager is creating that space, hold them up and help them maintain that. Everybody has a flag. How do we do this safety maintenance? How do we maintain psychological safety? So Edmondson offers us a few tips. She says that one of the first things that we need to make sure we're doing is we are responding appreciatively when any staff member raises a question or a concern. And this also includes when they show curiosity, support, or they make a mistake or have a new idea. And this positive reinforcement, it will ensure that their psychological safety does not dwindle, but instead deepens as they grow into their respective positions. Next, you want to be sure that you are establishing a need for interpersonal risk taking to do a good job. So, what does that mean exactly? Well, it means that it's okay to encourage and to frame your working environment as a place that is sometimes uncertain. It's okay to say, hey, we don't always know what's going on here. It's okay to say that the place where you work can be complex because this clarifies the expectation that yes, things will go wrong sometimes. But when things go wrong, the sooner that people notice, the sooner that people speak up about it, the better off everyone is. I actually heard another friend of mine tell me recently, who works in a job somewhat similar to what I do, that they found out about a process that had been going wrong and it was brought to someone's attention and it had been going wrong for a whole year. And it was very bad. I'm sure you guys can all imagine how horrible it would be if you didn't find out about a problem until a whole year after it had been going on, how that could just mess up a whole plethora of things. Ask questions, listen attentively. All of these things are incredibly important to maintaining. So be sure that you are doing all of that and demonstrate your appreciation. Show that you are recognizing people when they do speak up. You're going to be, nuances and ambiguity, which that fosters that culture of openness and learning and appreciation. So all of that stuff, make sure basically just that people know it's okay. So this now brings us to objective 3, where we are going to learn how psychological safety is an important feature for all workplace cultures. So when I mentioned earlier that leadership is responsible for shaping safety in the organization, I said that it can't be up to just them. I will reiterate that. It takes every single person within the organization to maintain the standards set forth by leadership and uphold those standards. So at the end of the day, I mean, don't we all want to be responsible for help uplifting others? I mean, it kind of makes everybody happy. We spread ripples of happiness. So let's just do that. It makes everybody happy. So what else can we do to make it safe for everybody? Well, we can have a psychologically safe environment, makes it easier for teams to manage any challenge that may arise, because now you've created trust in your team. People are going to be more dependent on each other, and then everybody feels like they can tackle anything. Psychological safe teams outperform others, even, quote, high-powered teams. Engagement and retention aren't trouble areas in organizations that are psychologically safe. To say a little bit more, though, about bullet number 2, if we go back to that for a moment, about the outperforming teams, in Edmondson's book, she goes on in several of her research studies talking about teams that might have been considered, like, say, small potatoes. These teams outperform teams that have all the gadgets, all the high power, all the stuff. And there was an original study that she did that kind of is what led to her writing that book. It was a study of 50 teams in the mid-90s with Google, and this was actually codenamed Project Aristotle. And again, this was where those results were proven that psychological safety is critical to high performance, because once these people were kind of basically given the go-ahead to just try anything, these very smart people, they suddenly got incredibly innovated, and they then were capable to create all of these new things that were very necessary for Google. And by doing this and just creating this, figure it out, take all your talent and come up with new ideas, this really created and fostered that talent that they all had to offer. In regard to retention, of course, we all want to stay in our jobs, and we would like to stay at our jobs if we're happy. So if you have what you need, you're not going to leave, right? So if you're getting to perform at your best self, engagement's going to come naturally. Marginalized groups and minorities also need to feel psychologically safe, kind of a little bit more so. Engagement and retention are important. They are even more so because it creates feelings of being valued at work. So keep that in mind when you're looking at those groups of people as well. Everyone's important, but some of those marginalized groups, they kind of need to have that psychological safety even a little bit more. So one thing that we want to keep in mind in Objective 3 is that, so yes, it is mission critical. So most companies value knowledge as a crucial source. So employees, they know that this is important and that their input is important, and it needs to be authentically engaged. They need to have that authentic engagement from their team members and from their supervisors. All right, so we also want to keep in mind that when when the whole team can be on board, when it's just one person being part of something and you're only in it for yourself, that's different than when the team is in it. So what psychological safety does is it creates this shared expectation. Suddenly, everybody's on board. Everybody wants to shoot for the stars. Suddenly, there is a shared expectation that we are all going to win. And I don't know if anybody, I would like to hope that some of you have been a part of something like that before, where everybody, again, has this drive to just win, to get to the top, to be the best. Everyone wins. And again, like I said, it's a shared expectation where there isn't one person who's like, man, I'm not interested. No, everybody is on board and ready to just go and has that drive and that desire. So mission critical, making it happen. So now we have to talk about, how do we have a successful landing? Well, there is a lot that goes into it. Again, as I said earlier, when you have newcomers that come in, they're going to feel maybe a dip or a drop in their psychological safety. This is your opportunity as a leader to double down on leadership and really bring these new folks into the fold and make them feel super comfy. What else can you do to have a successful landing? Well, encourage a culture of speaking up by creating open discussion and communication. Also, invite participation by creating curiosity. Invite people to think. All right. I'm sure all of you guys have jobs where people sometimes have to sit down and go, and don't leave it just up to the managers to come up with the ideas. Let everybody come up with ideas. Invite people to kind of figure out how things work. What do we do? How do we solve the problems? That's everyone's job. And then keep in mind that you need to reframe failure. Reframe failure. Make learning something that you make learning an experience. Consider how you present it. If you make a mistake, learn from it. That's what we teach children every day. You made a mistake, learn from it. Continue to do that. So reframe the way you think about failure. One last thing as we close today's training is I want to leave you with two strategies that you may want to try as you work to develop your psychological safety further in your workplace. All right, now do keep in mind that this information is something you probably want to further research on your own just to get a better grasp of so that you can fully implement it. But the first thing is something called brain trusts. All right, so brain trusts are a selected group of people. They meet with a shared agenda to offer candid feedback to their peers. So, again, candid feedback to their peers. It is effective if people respect each other's expertise and trust each other's opinion. Key features of brain trust are experimentation, and its inevitable trial and error processes are necessary for innovation. Again, you have to understand that trial and error is part of the process. So that's how brain trusts work. On the other side of this is focus groups. And focus groups are something that are used in lots of industries, but in this case, focus groups are selected group of people as well. They meet to share concerns about the workplace. They create a formal structure for input. So rather than people feeling like they're getting called on or having a meeting, I mean, this is something where people are going to know that they're sitting down to have a formal structure, to have a conversation. And it invites and encourages participation. So again, you're saying we have a formal structure here where we want you to talk, we want you to say things, right? You're inviting people to do that. And then it fosters that inquiry and knowledge sharing. Again, you're asking people to ask questions. You're inviting them to think. You're inviting them to say, hey, I got a question, or I need to know more about this thing. So it's creating a safe space for all of that to happen. So those are two strategies that you can use. Like I said, again, you might want to look those words up, brain trusts and focus groups, and get a little bit more of an in-depth idea, but that just kind of does give you some tip of the iceberg on what you might want to do to get that going in your organization. Also, Edmondson talks about this as a positive practice. She says that it is effective. Once you get it going, it will work. It will work once you get it going. So even if it starts out a little bit rocky, don't get frustrated. Keep trying. You might have to trade out groups and whatnot, but keep trying. So I encourage you to do that because it is something I think that could be quite fascinating. If you are interested in any of our other courses, you can certainly check out our webpage. Our email address is also there on that slide. You all are most welcome. Thank you for your participation today and have a lovely day.